This is Finlay Cowan, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
I love my job. It's so much fun. I get to meet incredible people. Sometimes it's people everybody in the whole wide world knows. And sometimes, like Finlay, it's their work. Even if you aren't sure, like, have I ever heard of this guy? You for sure have seen your artwork, man. And it's incredible to have you on. And just so you know, and this for the audience as well as for Finlay, anytime Wes says, I have somebody we should talk to, it's an instant yes. It's an automatic, we're going to do this thing. And so, Wes, why don't you tell us who Finlay is? And thanks for bringing it.
Finlay is my dark lord.
I'm a lot of people's dark lord, Wes.
Well, tough, you're mine. Finlay is I don't know. Finlay is artwork guru, architecture guru, the man with a lovely deep voice on a lot of music that we've made together, and we're both. I think we're both Pink Floyd fanatics.
That's a good place to start. Well, thanks so much for inviting me on, Pete. It's really great to be here. I've really been enjoying listening to your show recently.
Yes. Well, I appreciate that. When you're a kid, so I'm reading about a guy from America called Frederick Remington, right? And he was a kid who was pretty nifty with a pen and paper and could do sketches and caricatures. This guy lived back in the 1800s, so it's a long time ago, right? Okay. But his dad dies, leaves him just a load of money, and he's like, I'm going to blow through this so fast. And he does. And so he goes out to the Old West, right? Back in the Apache and Army days and all these kind of people fighting and everything. And he just takes this talent and turns it into this. His name is Frederick Remington. It turns into, he is the guy for Old West art. He had no idea he was going to do this. But if you've seen Old West, he was one of the first guys to draw horses actually running instead of like that crazy legs forward, situation. And there was no camera that could capture that back then. He just was able to see it and present it. If you've ever seen an Old West sculpture, it's either his work or someone has copied his work. Yeah. He had no idea he was going to be this guy. So did you have an idea you were going to be the guy that you are? I mean, if you look at everybody looks at your website, they're going to be like, holy shit, Yeah.
Well, I was talking to a very dear old friend of mine the other day called Wes, and we're talking about how there wasn't really a plan. No, there wasn't really a plan. There was some sort of you look at it in retrospect, and you can see there was some sort of formative things that happened that put you on that path. All I can say, one thing I knew for definite from a very early age was that I loved to draw, and that I wanted to be really, really good. And I used to look at artists, probably like Remington, but some of the Art Nouveau artists, Arthur Rackham, the fairy tale guy, all those guys, and just think it's going to take a long time to be that good. And I remember getting into my 20s and my 30s and thinking, I'm never going to get there. But somehow I did eventually, with enough practice, with enough hours at the drawing board. So yeah, that was the only thing. I just knew I wanted to be really, really good at something. And I maxed that out from a very early age, which is probably good advice for anybody listening out there as well, any youngsters.
Yeah, I mean, maxing it out, right? There's a couple of people that I could think of that come to mind right away. Tom Morello is one of them. He's like, I should play the guitar an hour every day. And then he's like, wait, an hour is making me good. What would 2 do? And then he's like, you know what? Fuck school, fuck eating. I'm just going to go mad scientist and just do this every day as long as I can. And look what came out the other end. Good gracious.
Yeah. And you do meet these amazing people as you go through life who are able to sort of turn corners and go different directions and do all sorts of incredible things with their lives. And I think that's just a different kind of person, but there are those of us who, make that choice fairly early on. And, there's some sacrifices that go with that as well. There's a lot of things I didn't do. I didn't travel extensively when I was younger because I was locked away in a room at a drawing board trying to, hone my craft and get my skills up. But then, if you have some skills, and you acquire more as you go through life, of course, but, they start to get noticed, don't they? And people start asking you to do stuff. So the other thing I was very aware of as a very young man was, make yourself useful. Don't be a prima donna. People want stuff done and they just have to get it done, and they're probably in a hurry and they've probably got 15 other things going on. So, just give them the thing that they want. Don't make it more complicated for them. Wes, I can see you're nodding your head. What do you think?
That's true. It's absolutely true. Yeah, I mean, we're sort of in a different side of the business, but where kind of everything has to be possible, right? And if you can't do it, you surround yourself with people that can do it, and you work together. You end up with an amazing team.
When I was a handyman, and John, who's my co-founder of the show, when we were handymen, one of the phrases I learned to say to the mom, to the office manager, whoever it was that we were helping out, I would say, I want you to worry about anything else but this. This is done. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to be relentless and I'm going to get it done. And if anything goes wrong, you're going to be the second person to know. Yeah, but nothing's going to go wrong. I've got this.
Creatives tend to be, we're sort of sensitive creatures, and we tend to be sort of very emotionally invested in what we do. And there is a tendency for designers and artists and stuff to sort of, when they're asked to do something, to sort of come back with a bunch of problems. Well, it's going to take this. I'm going to need to do this. And I remember the turning point in my life when I was dealing with an art director, and he was under pressure to get. We were working on, Rick Wright, the keyboard player for Pink Floyd, and he was art directing a video promo for him. And I remember the point at which the guy was just asking me all these questions, and I just said, "Leave it with me."
Yeah.
That's it. They just want to hear that, don't they? Leave it with me. You'll have it tomorrow morning. Boom. And you're ex-military, so I mean, you got disciplined in this. You got trained in all this stuff, didn't you? Yeah. From an early age.
Yeah, and you know what? I didn't have it when I went into the military. We had a boss that taught that to me. Like we had to attack the problem, and if we didn't solve it, we weren't able to stop attacking it. There are some problems that are insurmountable, but you'd better show up covered in dust, blasted out eyes, and just be like, oh, we tried the entire night, right? We brought in all these resources. The more people we tried, the less we got done. But that's what you have to do. And I didn't know that as a kid. I didn't know that. It was annoying. Like, what do you mean we have to keep trying? We tried twice. Let's stop trying. Like, nope, we're going to keep trying all night.
But hearing you say that now is really one of the fundamental things about Storm Ferguson. So Storm was the legendary album sleeve designer, Hypnosis, him and Aubrey Powell back in the 70s, Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, Genesis, Black Sabbath, and then on through into the recent years, Muse and Biffy Clyro. So he was my mentor and my teacher, and he used to drive me insane with that philosophy. Money didn't matter, time didn't matter, nothing mattered. Just keep going at it over and over and over again. And when I was young and just starting out, I would do I'd knock off a couple of concept drawings and think, yeah, that's it, I'm done. These are great. No, move that 2 millimeters to the left. Make that character in the background 10% smaller. That's not work. Try that. Try this. Try that. Do that. And he used to go on and on and on. And he really inculcated that into all of us that worked with him. That attitude,
It worked.
Yeah, and now I'm the top guy, and I'm driving everybody else crazy with that stuff. I'm the detail freak on site who's just pushing the youngsters to kind of like, no, that's not going to work because A, B, and C. We've got to try something else and find another way of doing it.
One of the things that Frederick Remington said was, when you draw horses, you have to draw them wrong. You can't draw them properly, and it blows your mind. It's the same thing with like columns, Greek columns have to be wrong so you can see them right.
Yeah, there's a couple of great quotes. I can't remember who it was, but he said, the only way to have a good idea is to have a lot of ideas. And one of my favorites is, get stuff down even though it's really bad. And every job we had to do as an album sleeve designer, we would just throw out ideas to get the bad ones out of the way. Because it doesn't cost much pencil and paper. It's a bit the same with military ops. You're planning. It's the planning. So it's a similar part of the process to that in a way. And we would just throw down all day, just sitting there drawing ideas, and some of them were just awful, you know. But there's a couple of advantages to that. One of them being that you can get the bad ideas out of the way. It gives you a certain amount of confidence. You've got to be prepared to throw down those bad ideas. But also, when you're in a room with a bunch of other guys, you can come up with a really stupid idea, and everybody laughs, and then somebody goes, "Yeah, but," and they'll take something from that, and they'll come back with something that's a good idea, you know, and suddenly you've got something. And I think sort of being too precious about your thinking process can be a bit dangerous, because you know, before anybody's sort of, you know, done the final thing, you should have that freedom, you know, to just throw anything goes. It's like jamming, isn't it, Wes?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We had a guest on, and he's a jazz musician and I believe an astrophysicist. If he's not an astrophysicist, maybe he's a cosmologist, but he looks up at the stars to learn things. And he uses jazz to remove the rules of what he knows in the astro world, right? And so, like, we talked about, like, what if the prime compound in this galaxy is gold? Like, what if there's just an abundance of gold? How would life form? And he's like, well, that's how you do this whole exercise. And you start thinking about it and constructing it. And then you can completely alter realities and have new, and now apply that mindset to the area you're in. And then you'll see that there are other doors and windows that you hadn't seen before. And that's how he approaches it, is with this ruleless, kind of boundless thing. Find something and then examine that with this new mindset.
Right. So I mean, I would call that lateral thinking, because you're going out sideways, aren't you?
Yeah.
So how does that apply to military thinking then? When you're trying to sort of plan a situation or an operation, do you have to think in the same way and think about ridiculous possibilities?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the main things that I always say is affect beats effect. And people who have any knowledge in English will say, but affect is a verb. Like, yes, but it's also a noun. And the meaning of it is a response to stimuli. You specifically, Finlay and Wes, create affect. You're like, yeah, I heard you play B flat. However, I need you to play, you know, I want you to do a diminished seventh on that, because I want this affect to come through. But the military thinks in terms of effect. No. You played B. Matter of fact, play more B. Play B flat 100 times in this minute. You know, that will do. You know, and like no, it doesn't matter how many times you play B flat. It's not the right chord.
Yeah.
Right.
Crazy.
What do you think of B flat, Wes?
B flat, pain in the arse on guitar.
So when I was bringing that example up a few minutes ago, I meant something slightly different, but I like the direction we went, because, you know, that iterative process, that like, what if we did slightly left of that, you know, we're looking at things differently now. A gay Superman exists now in the world because we've had the original Superman and we've changed him around over the last 100 years. And now everybody's losing their mind because there's going to be a gay Superman. Of course there is. Like, it's just a different iteration in that universe. What Remington was talking about was you have to purposely draw the horse incorrectly so that the eye will see it properly. If you draw it anatomically correct, which you can do as an artist, it will look wrong to the viewer.
Okay. If you draw, sorry, repeat that. If you draw
the horse perfectly, right? If you don't make a single mistake with what is there, like, it will not always look the way. It's just like when you, in cartoons, when they often draw us 3 fingers, because if you draw 5 fingers, it doesn't look right, in many forms. It's the same kind of thing where you purposely draw it in the way that it works for the eye rather than for reality.
Yeah, I got you. And speaking as a, you know, as an illustrator, you do an awful lot of cheating, you know. So you're cheating the eye all the time. So you develop all these little tricks and techniques to be able to sort of get away with stuff. But that was when I was younger. Now I'm older, I can draw everything really well because I've drawn everything 1,000 times. So now I just draw everything accurately. But it's no effort for me to do that. so I can draw incredibly complex things with lots of different objects and, and you want me to draw a giraffe, it's like, yeah, I don't have to Google it, you know, because it's all there in the memory bank. So my pencil kind of pretty much does whatever's coming out of my mind now, you know. But the first 30 years was a bit of a struggle, you know. You had to you have to have strategies and ways of faking things, and you've got your kind of go-tos that you know work. But conceptually, in terms of the imagery Storm was creating, this is what was so great about Storm, was he he didn't have any of those parameters. Yes, there were his style and his look, and there were certain things that he did, but whenever we sat down to do an album sleeve, he was just riffing off the music, and he was really just bouncing off what he felt was the psychological state of the musicians at the time that they were recording that album. And so he wanted the artwork to represent where that band was at that moment in time. And we used to have the best conversations where we'd sit down and we'd be listening to the advanced copies of the album and sort of studying the lyrics and trying to figure out where their heads were at. And, you know, lyrics can be very obscure anyway, can't they? They're not always that obvious.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just, oh, the lyric says this, let's do the album sleeve as a picture of this. He really wanted to capture the feeling of the music. And his way of describing it was like, music is a waveform. We're turning it into a light form, which is a 2D image. And he literally wanted the album sleeve, the image, to be a 2D representation of music. And so he had this approach where we used to just talk for hours and hours and hours, trying to analyze this stuff, writing hundreds of notes. And out of those notes, a lot of kind of wordplay and stuff, talking about the psychological landscape of that piece of music. Out of all those notes would come images. You know, you'd just start to draw up those images that you'd been doodling of notes. You know, we used to get some very funny emails from some of our clients where we asked the musicians to kind of describe what they were doing at the time. And the most memorable being the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Can I read this one out to you?
Please.
I don't know if I'm going to get sued for this, but yeah. So Anthony Kiedis, you know, they're working on this album, and said, "Can you send us some notes just out of interest?" So Anthony Kiedis kind of makes really good sense. He says, finding the beauty in sadness and loneliness, the poetry of dysfunctional relationships, water, the endless stream of creative energy that flows from hills, valleys, and oceans of California, and so on and so on. You know, makes really good sense. Very visual. He's obviously a very visual guy. John Frusciante, the guitarist. Disconnected connections, free form but in formation, flocks of birds, fish, leaves, and a stream making an overall shape. You can see this guy's an artist. You know, he paints as well, doesn't he?
Yeah.
But I love this one. Plump rhythm dancing woman with birds on her flanks, dancing on beach for herself, lifting her skirt for small boys to see. That was a description of his guitar playing on the song Serafina from the Stadium Arcadium album. And you kind of go, that's a good brief. I can work with that. Genius.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, that's remarkable. And you're translating different forms of art, and so they're trying to communicate simply this impossible thing, and you're trying to receive it and turn it into a piece of art.
Yeah, this is what is so beautiful, and obviously Storm had this very long relationship with Pink Floyd, and obviously being able to work with Pink Floyd, you know, you are working with the best, and their brief to us for an album sleeve would be, please design us an album sleeve. Right. You know, because they had that confidence in Storm and his team, hopefully, to get it right. You know, it's like, we're the musicians, you're the designers. You know, you do you know. And so they just pretty much left us to get on with it.
How many? Go ahead, Wes.
No, something stuck earlier when you said that it generated a 2D sort of light form of the waveform. But I mean, for me, everything you do and everything you guys as a team did is extremely three-dimensional. Was that intentional, or did that just happen? Because I know it's a 2D medium, but if you look at all those album covers, there's so much depth to it.
Yeah, I think that one I definitely have to give that to Storm. He had a sense of space. He was obviously heavily influenced by the surrealist painters, Magritte. Can't remember the other guy's name, De Cristo or something like that. Dali, obviously.
Dali, yeah.
Those landscapes, yeah. So, but he had a great sense of being able to sort of create a lot of detail in an image, but you could still squint at it from a distance, and it would be a shape and an object. You know, they were very sort of striking and iconographic in that way. But having said that, he did, you know, he wasn't limited by medium either. You know, this is the fascinating thing is, and again, I think it's great advice to any young creators or designers working in any medium, is don't limit yourself in the early stages. You know, I'd be doing sketches saying, "Oh yeah, but how are we going to do that?" And remember, this is pre-Photoshop. And he's like, "Don't think about that. Don't think about how we're going to do it." It's like, yeah, but I don't know how we're going to build a flying ship made out of water in the sky. And he's like, "I don't care. Just come up with the ideas, and then we'll figure out how to make the technology do it for us."
Yeah.
Christo, if that's the artist you meant, that guy, he really didn't know bounds either. I mean, he would do art on a scale that's just unimaginable to anybody else. I mean, wrapping islands, putting up miles and miles of art.
Incredible.
Yeah. That vision of all of this just needs a sprinkle of these things or a wrapping of whatever it is, and it'll become art.
Yeah, and you can see where Storm got some of his ideas about you know, landscape from him. There was one image we did, and I think they called it Moonshine Washing Line. And it was my homage to Storm's love of Christo, because we took all the Pink Floyd album sleeves, we printed them out on big sheets, like a bed sheet, you know, and then hung them on a washing line going down into a sea of some description. That was our homage to Christo. Couldn't quite do things on the same scale as him, but
oh my gosh, yeah. Anybody who's curious about Christo, just type in the word Christo, Jean. I'll put in the notes here. Christo, Jean, and Claude.net, and then you can look at all of their stuff, and you'll get an idea of how big the artwork is that these insane people put together. It is remarkable. I wanted to ask you, how much room is there in the marketplace for someone to be at the Pink Floyd Total Trust level? You know, there's going to be a handful of names, but is there room, I mean, for more people than that to do this job, or are they very peaky in their brilliance and everybody recognizes it and that's the only person you go to?
That's a really hard question to answer, because of in terms of the music industry, the way the music industry's changed and the way images are used, you know, things have become much more of a stream. It's much more digital and all this kind of stuff. So I don't know if we'll ever see the likes of sort of the kind of auteur album sleeve designers, but I guess those artists move into other industries and things. I mean, at the moment, I'm in the same position as Storm was in the sense that I'm doing all these real life environments, and it's the same sort of relationship that I have. It's like I'm the auteur creative that sort of just creates the whole vision, and then it's a matter of executing it. There's still a lot of teamwork involved, obviously. It's still commercial and it's still commercially driven. But yeah, it's a tricky one to answer. I suppose in the fine art field, you would still see that, wouldn't you? But I think less so in the media, in the commercial media nowadays.
The other question in terms of album covers and whatnot, that art form has evolved, I guess probably the right way to say it. And it evolved into CD covers, which you had a whole different way to present art. And it's not just that first page, right? Like I watched recently we had DC Lee from the Style Council on the show a while back, and they were known in their album covers to have extensive notes and artwork and, you know, all these different things to create this real, you know, a lot of us remember the era when you grab that jacket and you're like, I'm just going to sit here, listen to this music and go on this. It was almost like a mini book in a lot of cases. you know?
Yeah, and who was it? Was talking. Steve Hughes, the comedian, was Australian comedian, was on the other night, and he sort of made the same reference about how you gave time to an album. You'd say, "Oh, let's listen to an album," and you got it out and you took it out of its sleeve, and you sat and listened to the whole album, and you read the liner notes and you looked at the artwork. And since I started in the industry in '93, I started in the music industry. People have always been saying that, and they always say it with a slightly nostalgic feel, oh, those days. And it's like, guys, those days never went away. I mean, we are in the era of the box set right now, aren't we? I mean, every year, either the Stones or Zeppelin or one of my favorites releases yet another lavish box set that I can that I can lovingly sit there and listen to and enjoy, and
It's true, but with newer artists, your artwork real estate is down to about that.
If that, it's an icon on Spotify.
Exactly, and also, I mean, this is a little mean and a little generalized, but there's not that many artists out there who can write a full album's worth of engaging music.
That's interesting. So I was reading, what's his name, David Hepworth, the music journalist. Yeah, I was reading one of his books, and as he gets towards the end, he's talking about how artists will be writing more in terms of songs, and they're releasing a series of songs now, aren't they?
Which is how people are consuming it. I mean, not that many people are interested in an album experience. How many people do you know who could sit still for 60, 70 odd minutes and just let the music roll over?
Yeah, but there still are those people out there, and they pick it up from
their grandparents.
I was when we went to the Pink Floyd exhibition at the Victorian Albert Museum in London, and we were standing in the shop, and there was a young girl. She must have been about 15, 16, with her dad, and she was going through the vinyl and saying, "Oh, can I have this one, please, Dad? Can I have that one, please, Dad?" And his dad was kind of harumphing and resisting a bit. And I was like, "Dude, your daughter wants Pink Floyd on vinyl? Seriously, I'll buy it for her."
Right. So we have this thing, and I'll give them a shout out because they're great. There's a company, a charity called Vet Tix, and they give veterans tickets. Basically, I get it for the cost of the transaction fee. And if you're willing to go see a lot of different stuff, there's a lot of stuff you can see. One of the things I love to do is go see fine art type music performances, opera, symphonies, quartets, whatever it's going to be. And the other day we went and saw this up and coming cellist, and by up and coming I mean the best person in the world at 22 at playing the cello. And because of where I live, we get really high end people. But it's this guy and an accompanying piano playing cello and piano pieces for 90 minutes, 2 hours, something like that. And because you sit there and there's really nothing to look at, you can watch the dude play for a while and you get interested in that. And then you watch the pianist play for a while, but then you're forced to sit there and be with yourself in the music, and you go off in a direction. And so my lovely girlfriend and I kind of compare notes afterwards on where we went, and is oftentimes similar places, right? Because we have similar lives, obviously. And it's like, yeah. And then at one point she's like, and then I got mad at you, and I got mad at me. But the music takes you on this journey, whether it's a classical piece that's 150 years old or it's something modern. You let go because you are there. You let go, and the music does take you somewhere. And then you realize, that's right, I'm listening to music, and you come back to reality, and then you go on a journey again.
Agreed. Finlay's music is like that.
Yeah, I'm still doing concept albums. Concept albums with accompanying graphic novels, so they're very, very story driven. But so there's albums that tell stories, and they're very specific, like Pink Floyd, The Wall. Okay, there's an album that tells a story like Dark Side of the Moon, which is much more subtle than that, isn't it? It's about a whole range of ideas and feelings and emotions, but it's still kind of telling you something. But you could say that all all music and all imagery is somehow narrative. It somehow has to tell a story.
Yeah.
And this brings me back to my fascination with mythology. Now, Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychologist and philosopher, is the first person to coin the words subconscious, wasn't he? And introvert and extrovert. He said, psychology is modern mythology. Mythology is ancient psychology. And what he was trying to say by that was, we have within us. He said it's almost. He believed it was almost genetic. They didn't have that language at the time, but it's kind of in our DNA. We have 1,000,000 years of symbolism inside us, visual imagery, ideas of stories, imagery of the serpent of chaos or the sword or the hero and all these myths. He believed that they were built into us, and we share them. They spread out across the collective unconscious. And then Joseph Campbell came along, didn't he, in the 50s, and he developed the idea of comparative mythology, and he discovered this across cultures all around the world. So the general idea is that we all have some kind of deep instinct for these. There are these universal themes, aren't they? And I think it's when art or design plugs into that, or music plugs into that, that's where we really feel it. It is somehow deeply familiar to us because it speaks to ancient things in us, ancient drives. The desire to be safe, or the need to kind of leave the safety of the campfire and go out into the forest and face the dangers out there, but then come back with some kind of knowledge that's going to benefit your tribe or your family and elevate you and move things on. And I think the best music or the best album sleeves are the ones that trigger that deep feeling, that deep emotional feeling. And you can't always say why. The guitar solo in Hotel California, you couldn't necessarily say, oh, that's mythological, but it is. It taps into something very deep in us, doesn't it?
It does.
So one of the things with what's great about, so maybe we don't have the album cover beanbag headphones on experience, right? But we do have other experiences. And I think about the bands that do a really good job. I mean, Pink Floyd, if you want to see an incredible show, it's hard to get a better, more complete artistic show than those guys live, right? I'm a big U2 fan, but they do this really, really well.
Yeah.
They, during their last stadium tour, when they were doing the Joshua Tree thing, they passed a giant sheet around the crowd and projected an image on it as it went around the crowd. And so it's like 40 rows by 40 rows. It's an incredibly big piece of fabric. And it hits you with these images. And so you have these tapestries that have, and like with bands like U2 and Pink Floyd, they charge a lot of money for their performance because all of this art goes into it.
Yeah.
Think about New Order's live show and all of the images that flash on the screens and everything. New Order's never going to be a great live band, but those images they can run that same show for years, and they have, because they got the art part right, and it gives you something to bounce the music off of that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
Yeah, so maybe the album sleeve experience has shifted to the big LED screen, the big projection screen, because that is so possible now and doable now. What I loved about the U2 tour was the single giant screen.
Yeah,
and
so
they
good.
used that to create a sort of feeling of vertigo or movement, and you could do very simple things. And it's certainly something I would like to have a go at myself, given the budgets and the opportunity, is to be able to create those kind of the impact of an album sleeve, but on a large live screen, and be able to. A lot of people do it badly. Obviously, there are a few exceptions. U2, I think Tool do an amazing job.
Sure, yeah.
But you see a lot of stuff that seems to be kind of cobbled together, thrown together a bit. And you can do a lot more with light, and simple compositions. I think there's.
I was gonna say, on the tour before that, the Innocence and then Experience tours, they turned the stage 90 degrees and went down the length of the arena, and then had two lighted scrims so they could do things behind the scrim or hide in it. And it was just brilliant. And they also changed the way the music was played, because now you had a circular format instead of this linear, and it sounded better. And all of that art capability, it's just remarkable how they lead the industry. And there's other bands that do this really well, but they just seem to have great people and the courage to allow them to be great.
Yeah, and the way you describe it as well is there's a simple composition to that. They're not overdoing it. It's not just a ton of lights flashing on and off. They're taking a single color and a single light and a single shape. Or the one that really struck me was when they did the whole of the Joshua Tree, and they're walking up onto the stage, but you have this incredible widescreen with the it's like a drone shot or a car shot, isn't it? And it's just so simple but so profoundly effective, and talk about taking you on a journey.
So their music is incredible, but that's their domain. What you're describing now is your domain. So when they come to you, U2's like, hey, we want to try something different, we know that you're capable of doing this. How do you feel pressure to get up to where they're at and to serve the music, to serve the audience at a level that, I mean, there are very few stadium acts left. Red Hot Chili Peppers is one. Pink Floyd. I'm going to see the Stones this week.
Great.
Right? AC/DC, if they decide to go out, they can pull off a stadium tour. I'm running out of people I can talk about in terms of bands.
Yeah, I think
you can do.
Well, sadly, I think I remember an old friend of mine who's a producer talked about how he was thinking about artists. He was saying, you had like the pre-Raphaelite artists, or you had the Cubists or something. And you'd have like 3 or 4 of them or 10 of them, and they would dominate for 10, 20 years. And then after that, you just had all the kind of like, second division guys, and then the copyists for the next 50 years.
Right.
And he said, I can't help wondering if that's rock and roll, if that's what's happened. You got those first, 10, 15, 20 acts in, and they dominated for 30, 40 years. But we may not see the like again. We still see a lot of great bands coming up, fantastic bands, and people will always want shows and entertainment. That they're always going to want that spectacle, aren't they? So there's always going to be something there. But I think those legacy acts, those the classics, are just going to hold a certain place in people's hearts. But then what we're seeing now is, I'll go and watch Mozart, go and listen to a Mozart concerto. It doesn't matter that Mozart isn't there. Mozart doesn't have to be alive for me to go and listen to Mozart and have that experience. And I think we're going to see that with the music that's been made over the past 50 years. You're already starting to see it with the sort of tribute acts who are doing, some of them do an amazing job. So, 200 years time from now, or 100 years time, people will be sitting there in their tuxedos listening to a performance of Dark Side of the Moon, or Back in Black, or
yeah. I mean, Beethoven wrote music for a piano that didn't exist yet. He knew it would get wider and have more notes, and so he wrote music. So I would say that Mozart, Beethoven, those guys are there. I mean, you hear them playing notes that aren't modern notes anymore. Like all trill far right into the piano keyboard. It's like it's a different time, and you do I end up going there. I'm like, hey, there's Mozart right there. Like you don't hear that kind of music anymore, so you do have to go to the room where he's at to hear it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I had Chris Thomas King on the show, and afterwards we had a conversation. He's a really famous blues musician. He's won multiple Grammys on the same night. He's really, really talented, and can do anything he wants on the guitar. He's absolutely a legend. And he's like, did you think we would see a time when guitar wouldn't be the primary pop music instrument? He's like, I can't imagine it. I don't even know what to even say about it. And here's a guy that this is what he is, right? He's a guitar player first. He can play with his lips and his tongue and his teeth and between his legs. He can do all of that stuff. But the industry, they don't care. So what, obviously art moves, but what do you think about that?
Well, I think people will always create great music for about 1,000 years before Elvis Presley released Heartbreak Hotel and kicked it all off, or Blue Suede Shoes or whatever it was. You know, musicians were troubadours. They sang for their supper. You know, they just, you know, they moved from town to town, and they probably looked like Keith Richards, and they probably drank like Keith Richards, and you know, they would show up and they would play in the inn, and you know, die of syphilis shortly thereafter. And that's how it was. And then miraculously, over a period of time, these guys became like gods. And for a short but wonderful moment in time, you know, this art form was elevated to this status because of technology. Because of vinyl, because of the economics of teenagers having spending money and teenagers becoming an economic block and blah 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 blah. Nothing else to spend their money on. Basically, clothes. Food wasn't that great at the time, so it was basically clothes, records, and concerts,
and drugs.
And then, well, not even for most people, not even drugs in the early days. And then get to the 80s, and you know, you've got computer games, you've got fashion kicking in on much bigger level, and then of course digital made a lot of the media free. My son's generation, they spend their money on clothes and food, because they don't have to spend money on music or films or any of that stuff. So it just shifts. You know, it'll just shift somewhere else. But those musicians, you know, they'll still be playing. You'll never stop them. And the other thing, of course, is Wes. You probably understand this. Obviously, you know what you're doing in your studio now would not have been possible 30 years ago.
No, not at all.
So in some ways, it's more possible for musicians to make music now than it was before. They just don't get a private jet.
Yeah, well, it just needs to be balanced out a bit more. You know, the people who are actually earning money from that music need to filter it down a little bit better. You know, to the people who design the artwork, to the people who put the music together, and to the musicians and composers. You know, I mean, streaming is earning so much money at the moment, but it's not filtering back. You know, you still get people who are trying to get a freebie out of a recording studio, and recording studio rates haven't changed in the last 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
But electricity has gone up, wages have gone up, everything has increased in price. But still, you get record labels who are raking it in at the moment, going, "Oh well, you know, it's just a starting artist. You know, can you do us a freebie?" It's like, do you know how much it costs to switch this on?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, back in the good old days, we'd get 50 grand to do an album sleeve. That's 50,000 GBP. You know, so I don't know what that is in dollars. I don't know what that is in today's money, but you're looking
$75,000 or so, something like that.
Probably more. And then towards the end, I was getting offered like 250 quid to do a sleeve. You know,
oh my god,
stuff like that. And that's what. But you know, you move where the money is. And I'm doing the same job now, but I'm creating physical environments for people, which is it's an experience. It's a bit like designing a show for a band, you know, but I'm designing interior architecture, and it has to be a space that takes people on a journey. It's experience. There's a story there, but I have all these other components that I get to play with as well, which are like health and safety and regulations and building control, and you know, it's a vastly more complex thing. But creatively speaking, pretty much doing the same kind of thing. Slightly less surrealism. Fewer naked women involved. In fact, no naked women involved anymore. But I get to build really, really cool stuff that is going to be around for a while. So, you know, you win some, you lose some.
Talking about naked women, how much fun was it putting all those album covers on those ladies for the back catalogue?
Well, yeah, of course. Well, I suppose that's the one that everybody wants to talk about, because that's the biggest, isn't it? And you know, that was the image that I think it's become one of the biggest selling rock posters of all time. Somebody at the record company once said that it actually, in terms of merchandise, it had outsold Dark Side of the Moon as a as a merchandising image. So you've got so you've got 5 naked women sitting on the swimming pool with their backs to you. Yeah, that's the one. And we were asked to do back catalogue. So we want, the record company wants to promote Pink Floyd's back catalogue. So I was churning out a bunch of ideas, and in a 10 minutes of impropriety, I knocked that one out. And it's a pun, isn't it? It's back catalogue. And everybody laughed at the time, and kind of Storm even said, "That's not art, it's advertising," which was a criticism, but I took it as a huge compliment, because ultimately it is, what we're doing is commercial. It's not fine art. You are putting something on a product, and we're trying to engage people with it and want them to listen to it. So
you're trying to sell the back catalog. You're not making an artistic statement. I was going to ask you about this, because I used to work at Tower, and that experience of walking through, even as a kid before I worked there, you would pick something up based upon, the album cover. It was really commercial. I'm going to show you guys an album cover here. If you type in the word Ray Gay Jackson, you will only get Reggie Jackson, who's a Hall of Fame baseball player. But here's this guy taking a play on the name Reggie Jackson, and he does this. And I have never forgotten this album cover. It's not good in terms of art,
but it will have that impact on you. And when I was a child, I lived in a small market town in Oxfordshire. So it's sort of classic little English town with a town square and a fountain in it. And there'd be a record shop. And I was only about 8 or 9. I remember walking past this record shop and seeing the cover of Zeppelin's Houses of the Holy, with the naked kids climbing up the Giant's Causeway in Ireland. And it spooked me. It spooked me deeply. There was no writing on it. And I was so desperate to understand what mysteries were in that. What could the music possibly be like? And obviously I ended up working with Storm years later, and trying to capture that same thing quite a lot of the time with the back catalogue image. To answer your question, Wes, yes, it was a lot of fun, all very professional, of course, but we had a really good body painter, and I remember her name. She was Phyllis Green, so she came in to do the body painting. Tony May did the photography, and Storm was in charge of it all. And the original idea, the original drawing, actually had men and women, so it was boy, girl, boy, girl.
Okay.
And they kind of looked more like they were about to swim. There was kind of more of a tension in their bodies. And it was like they were going to dive in and do the laps. And Storm said, apart from criticizing it, Storm said, he criticized everything, but that's fine. But Storm said, no, let's just make it females because of that hourglass figure. He said, the shape, just think of the shape. And so that's when we just turned it into all women. And then he took it much more in that vision of the sort of paint. It's painterly, isn't it? The whole image. Yeah. So it's almost like a classic Orientalist painting of the Turkish baths in 1867 or something, and which is something that's very much after my own heart and aesthetic as well. But he just got it right. And this is pre-Photoshop, remember? So very, very little retouching done on it. And it was actually shot on Ektachrome, which is a type of film format that doesn't exist anymore. So the original prints of that can't be redone.
Wow.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, and obviously I've got a couple of them, but the color and tone is just incredible of what he and the photographer Tony May achieved. Though it's just amazing. It was shot in a swimming pool in Wandsworth, and Wandsworth is this borough in like South London. It's kind of just like it's nothing very glamorous about it.
Yeah.
Nothing special about Wandsworth at all. But, so people are quite surprised by that. But obviously the image went on, it just went stratospheric. And I think, again, there's mythology there. It's Aphrodite rising out of the waves. And Aphrodite in Greek and Roman imagery was always depicted cut off at the waist because she was coming out of the water, So you have that sort of goddess type imagery, you have the harem imagery, you have the sort of the beauty of the painting and everything. And but at the same time, obviously the appeal is that there's all these album sleeves that 6 album sleeves that people are sort of deeply connected to, and we've gathered them all together in one image. And and that thing now, obviously I've googled about it a few times, and people do so many different versions of it now. So it's become a sort of trope in itself, hasn't it? The idea of taking 5 bodies and painting something on their backs has now gone all over the place. I saw like somebody had done like an Avengers version, and somebody else had done a My Little Pony, which was bizarre, and somebody else had done like a Simpsons version and all this kind of stuff. So it's just kind of become its own thing. But yeah, just simple idea, well executed.
What about you, Wes? What from your youth, what album covers stand out in terms of like, this is, a different thing for you?
Well, I mean, obviously the first album I ever owned, because my dad gave it to me when I was about 4, was Dark Side of the Moon. So that's firmly imprinted in my brain, and everything kind of went on from there. I mean, I had to have everything by Pink Floyd, therefore. But then, yeah, I mean, stuff like, and that's where I kind of suddenly started noticing, oh my God, who's this guy Finlay? Because I had a Dream Theater record where the guy's head is an amphitheater. It's like, wow, that's awesome. And it was like, oh, okay, cool. And then I had a Bruce Dickinson album with 2 guys leaning into a pond, and it's basically, reproductive organs. It's called Skunk Works, and it's Bruce Dickinson, and it's like suddenly all these records that I own had this guy on it. And then we met and we ended up working together, and it's like, oh my God, this is mad.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, you mentioned one of your favorite album sleeves. What else? What other album sleeves have had a massive impact on you?
On me?
Well, I
on Pete.
Pete, yeah.
Oh well, the thing is like, as someone who knew about music but wasn't really a musician, and spent a lot of time in Tower, there are so many of them that just stand out. I'm always struck by, and I'm trying to pull some of them up here as I'm doing this, but the Joy Division album cover is it's iconic. You just need to see it for us. If you know what the source is, then you're like, yeah, I understand who you're playing off of. I don't have the logo on today. The logo for the show now is my own version of that, and it's a horizontal waveform of someone saying the Break It Down show, but that's nice. Inspired by that. I'm gonna show you this too. There's another one. This is great that you asked this question. This frame that goes around the picture, that is straight from the Style Council, introducing the Style Council. Like, that's inspired by their album cover, So,
oh yeah, I remember.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Once it's like, oh, of course.
Yeah.
And I'll pull it up and I'll put it in the thing. But yeah, I mean,
the list is endless, isn't it? I mean, just look at Iron Maiden's catalog. Praying Mantis, Supertramp, all that stuff is just
so. It's interesting, Wes. You mentioned a lot of the ones you're talking about are the illustrated ones, which is quite interesting, because obviously I'm first and foremost an illustrator, and then concepts we had got turned into photographic images. But there was also while I was working with Storm, I had the opportunity to meet all those guys as well. So I met Roger Dean, who did all the Yes sleeves, and George Hardy, who did the hands on the Pink Floyd "Wish You Were Here" thing.
Yes.
He also did the first Led Zeppelin sleeve, and bumped into him on Brighton Station when I was going to a meeting with Storm one day. It was like, wow, standing there looking at these guys chatting away. Other ones it's interesting because it's the ones that struck me before I heard the music. Because sometimes I feel that I love the album sleeve because I love the music. So Exile on Main Street is one of my favorite albums by the Stones, and I love the sleeve. I just keep buying that album over and over again. They have sold me that album so many times.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if I love the sleeve because of the sleeve or because of the music.
Right.
I think in the case of that one, because it's all these weird black and white shots, and you're you're looking into somebody's life and they're having a very cool life. That's what I like about that sleeve, you know, and it's got sort of scrawled writing, and it just feels very documentative in some way. And you know, they're just getting on with their very, very cool life, and you're just getting a little glimpse at it. You know, they're not posing. Oh, there you go. There's the style count.
Yeah, so there's their album. There's that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I get it. Yeah. They
yeah, go ahead.
well, they had a very strong visual graphic style as well, didn't they? I can't remember who it was who did their sleeves, but he's a well-known designer. Yeah.
Yeah, that Genesis album cover, I can't think of it. It's black and it has like toy pieces on it, and they're kind of in motion. I'll see if I can find it. That album cover, I'm not even a big fan of Genesis, but that album cover is just burned into my head. When I think about Genesis, I think about that image first, and then I think about Phil Collins and everybody else who was in the band.
Yeah, I mean, when we were kids, there's a book came out called The Album Cover Album, which Storm and Aubrey Powell had put together. Are you familiar with that book?
I am not.
It was really famous back in the 70s. Like everybody had it, and it was a 12-inch book full of album sleeves, and it was our way in to seeing all this stuff that we'd never heard the music. So there would be a Zappa sleeve, or there would be Creedence Clearwater Revival, or there'd be this or that or the other. And I remember just, you know, poring over that when I was maybe 14, 15, 16, just wondering what was in those albums. It made me want to listen to the album. Oh, that one, right? Yeah. Really striking. Yeah.
I don't know why. But in some ways, it's a ticket. You're like, do you want to go on this ride? You're like, yeah, I do.
Well, it's a really good point. And one of the things that what you need to do when you're creating an image, doesn't have to be an album sleeve, but any image, is you have to understand that people are curious. Humans are curious, right? And it was curiosity that got us out of the cave and into the world. You know, it's curiosity that drives us, isn't it? So you sort of have to say to yourself, well, how do I pique that sort of, and again, I'm going back to sort of deep human things here, you know, how do I pique that fundamental curiosity? How do I capture somebody's attention? And this is often done, this is where a lot of advertising people get it wrong. They do it by trying to give you information, as much information as possible. And actually, what you can do, if you want to really want to capture somebody's curiosity, you ask them a question. So you look at all these album sleeves, like the one you just showed, or the Style Council one. It's like, what's that couple doing there?
What's happening? Yeah.
Are they falling in love? Are they splitting up? Are they talking about a mutual friend? Is it a brother and sister? Is it It asks a question. You're sort of drawn to it because it's like, what's the story here? And this, I think Storm was particularly brilliant at, because he made these very strange things, and you just go, what's going on there? And it just pulls you straight in. And once you figure it out, of course, you get a little buzz because you've figured it out, but you don't have to at the same time, you know? So it's that curiosity that if you get people to ask a question, you know, or ask them a question with the image, that's often what pulls, you know, that'll have the impact.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because then they're trying to figure out what the story is, and then we're back to the whole mythology, psychology thing there, you know.
Or you make up your own story.
Precisely, yeah.
Which could be as valid as the original story.
Yeah, exactly. And again, you know, this is what I love about Storm's work. He could be very subtle in that respect as well. You know.
Yeah.
With the Pink Floyd in particular, but we rarely ever showed faces. Now the rule is, with magazine covers and entertainment and media and album sleeves, show the face, show the face, show the face. Humans respond to faces, you know, and did completely the opposite.
Yeah.
You know, and it was like, because you always just see the backs of people's heads, or it's a guy in a trilby meeting a woman on a train station, and they're always sort of slightly turning away, or you know, because he wanted you to sort of project into that character. You know, it's like that could be me in that picture.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yes.
How does that translate to when you're doing a building or some other non-music flat 2D surface?
Oh, thank you for asking that. Make yourself comfortable.
I'm gonna pull a pin out on my chair and I'm gonna lean way back.
Well, this is what's so exciting about designing environments, because you're working with lots of different materials and you're working with light and things like that, and you do the same thing. You come round the corner and you've just put some like vintage object, like an antique or something, but it's out of place, or it's upside down, or so you come around and you go, what is this place I'm in now? So you create these kind of moments as you move through the space. So we divide the space up into lots of different components. Yeah. So there'll be a bar or a cafe, a restaurant. There's play areas for the kids. There's rooms for doing different things. And so with every one, you're sort of creating a new theme. So you have those little surprises. So we were doing things like we would hide like a little mouse house, like a little mouse door, and people would discover it, and they'd get down on their hands and knees, and suddenly they're sitting on the floor of this place with their kids, and they're opening the mouse door, and we built a whole little world inside there. Or or we're pulling in sort of old Victorian toys that people just have never seen before. They won't have any idea what they are, and we'll put them in a little glass case, but we'll tuck it away behind something, So again, it's the classic example is they will make up their own story around that, as they go through the journey. And you kind of do the same with lighting and texture as well. So you'll move from a very brightly lit space that's very airy and clean feeling, and then you'll sort of be pushed into a more narrow corridor, which is a bit darker, and so on like that.
Yeah,
same thing.
I was going to say, before you started talking about this, I'm always fascinated by the mysterious door that's like 2 or 3 stories up. Maybe it has a balcony that no one could ever stand on,
Yeah, I love
You
those.
just think, what on earth? Like, it makes you pay attention. Maybe the building isn't all that great. Maybe it was an accident, but you start trying to answer the question and you don't even know what the question is.
Yeah, and don't we all love the Narnia cupboard? The wardrobe, and you open it up, and I haven't done one yet. I've done like 5 sites in the past year, and I haven't managed to fit one in yet. And I'm so going to do one. It's only a matter of time.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like, there's certain things as I encounter the zeitgeist in general, there's things I'm like, I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that. There's things that I see that I want to get into the show, but it's not about what I want to get in. It's what fits in that spot. And so I gather these little beats and moments, and I for sure bring those things in because they do illustrate something,
Yeah, but what? Give me an example.
Just today, I wrote an email in a group that I was in, and I brought up the Song of Roland and Turvold, the poet that wrote it. We're complaining about this gay Superman thing. And I'm like, no one cares about Roland anymore. And if he does come back, he'll be something different than when he was out riding horses with the Carthaginians, or not the Carthaginians, with what's his name?
Cathars.
Yeah, out the,
Cathars.
Yeah, like this is from 1,000 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And it's knights, and it's Charlemagne is the name I was trying to go for, right?
Right.
And so
okay.
No one cares if he blew his horn and got massacred in a path. No one cares about that. We move on to time. So, but you think about something like the Song of Roland was this incredible masterpiece for hundreds of years that young kids read and dreamt about because it was like the knights and everything. But it's moved on, and so I think it's an interesting illustration of something that was prominent in everybody's mind. Prince is dead, but Prince is still around. The Beatles will probably still be around, but most of the other acts that are around right now probably won't be around like Beethoven and Chopin and all these other dudes are because there's just not enough left. And so I like examples.
I was listening to Jordan Peterson talking about how hard it is to be an artist or creative. And he was saying, he says it's such a pyramid. Apparently, of all the classical music ever played, Beethoven, Mozart and Bach make up 97% of it.
Sure.
And out of their entire works, it's something like, it's the same thing. It's like, only 2% of their work played, and most of the rest of it goes by the wayside. Yeah.
Mm.
Same with Spotify. I mean, Spotify is a perfect example now. It's like something. Isn't over 80% of the music on Spotify doesn't get played at all?
Right.
It's some ridiculous, it's just completely negligible,
Yeah.
So it's what we call a Pareto distribution, isn't it?
Mm.
So Pareto distribution sort of suggests that over a period of time, everything gathers at one end. So all the money gathers in one place. This is what you were talking about earlier on.
Yeah.
You have very few musical acts with all the money and all the listens and all the and then a huge amount of people get almost nothing. But it sort of applies to almost everything. Sooner or later, everything sort of shifts in one direction, and it's almost people don't know how to deal with that. We don't know how to make things more equal, because it almost seems to be a law of physics. I don't want to say it is, but things generally do tend to shift that way. And over a period of time, you see it sort of culturally as well, how say take a genre like heavy metal or something becomes more and more and more formulaic over a period of time, and it narrows itself down, so people only want to hear a very specific set of symbols. Whereas heavy metal 40 years ago, you wouldn't recognize it. I mean, in terms of, what you would have called a heavy metal act like Uriah Heep or something like that. Just, they did such an incredibly broad range of music and experimentation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're a heavy band, like Dimebag was heavy, and now he's kind of gentle because everything has kind of moved past it. And albums have lost that need to, because you listen to one song, you just make, and West Indies I'm talking about, you just make 11 of the same song. Here's a heavy song, followed by a heavy song, followed by, but I need a second to breathe. Maybe fall in love for a second. Maybe be happy about something, and then go back to being pissed off and mad and heavy, but
can't be happy in metal, man.
It can work both ways though, because on the one hand you've got there's a great quote where somebody once said Led Zeppelin would have more ideas in one song than most bands can have an entire career or an entire album, or at the other end of the scale is a great quote from Angus Young from AC/DC saying, people are always accusing us of releasing the same album 11 times. I take offense at that. It's been 14.
Yeah.
Because it's like, this is what we do. It works. We're not changing that.
They're all alchemists, and they figured out how to turn metal into gold. Why would you change the formula? There's no song they could add to their set list that would kick another song out. That's not possible anymore.
I mean, in the case of AC/DC, I really wouldn't want them to do anything different.
Yeah, right. They're so great at that.
Yeah, you just want them to do that, and I'm grateful for them to just stick at that.
Yeah,
definitely. Agreed.
Well, listen, I've had you for an hour, and actually an hour plus. I don't want to take up your whole night, but it's just fascinating talking about these things and sort of just banging around these topics. It's been really great.
And there's so much more to talk about.
Oh my God, yeah.
It's been lovely, really lovely talking to you. Thanks so much. And it was nice that it was very sort of casual and sort of quite random, and we're just chatting. But it would be great to talk to you again and cover some of the other stuff as well. Nice,
yeah, no, for sure. It's great. The ability to put art into things and art in our lives. Here in America, we're often very German with our freeways and highways and everything. Where in France, they're like, we're going to design a highway, but we're also going to have an artist involved in the process. And all of these different things where we can enrich our lives by employing artists legitimately to do what they do well. And just have a more pleasant. I'm not saying that France gets it right, but what I'm saying is it's a whole lot more pleasing to look at when you have some actual attention to what this could be instead of just a functional. Not everything designed by a band,
Yeah, and Wes and I were talking about this the other day. Just perhaps I won't keep you any longer. We were talking about how processes have become so technicized. So. A friend of mine had been talking about architecture. Architecture used to be an art form, but it's become so technicized now.
Right.
In the sense that you can actually build a mall or a tower block without making a single decision. for you. You don't have to make any decisions. You just bolt together systems.
Modules, yeah.
Yeah, modules. And I've seen the systems that do it, and they're incredible, but it just doesn't need a human to go near it. And Wes responded to this by saying, "Oh my God, we see that with music."
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, totally.
It's kind of like, yeah, it's just generated out of a series of pre-programmed modules, sort of bolted together like a iron shed or something like that.
And you don't
yeah,
have,
I mean, you
yeah.
just have to look at the London skyline. I mean, I've been here long enough to remember none of this new shit that's up there. But if you look at it, it's boring. It doesn't engage. You know, there's something that looks like a walkie-talkie. There's something that looks like a weird razor, and then there's this unfinished piece of crap that just stands there, and it's the shard, and it's like, what's this doing here? And you can see it. It's the Lego generation. It's like copy paste, bit smaller, copy paste, bit smaller, copy paste. Done.
Yeah.
Boring.
Yeah.
So the process is
Lego's
it's kind of
our imagination. You had to build your own model, right? You had a box of just different colors and things. And you didn't. I hate seeing a little kid follow a plan. No, you don't need this plan. Build anything you want. But I want to build a ship. Well, then build it. Here's the Legos. You know, go do it.
Yeah.
I mean, but even at, you know, things that are formulaic, like Centre Pompidou in Paris comes to mind. You know, that is a modern building. It is quite formulaic, but it grabs you.
Yeah.
You know, it draws you in, as opposed to, you know, another bit of, you know, steel that you can see. They just went with that pattern, that pattern, that pattern, that pattern, and maybe somebody went, "Oh, wouldn't it be cool if we did that?"
Yeah.
And
but then they lost their job the next day. We're not having that. But I think you make a good point there, Wes, in the sense that, you know, you do see this as you say, cut and paste, and you see it in music and you see it in graphics, but you know, you have a choice. You know,
you do,
and I suppose that's the message, isn't it? It's kind of like, well, you don't have to do that, you know, because for every bad piece of architecture, I see something wonderful as well. And there's amazing things happening with materials and design. And it's the same with music, you know, there's tons of kind of just, as you say, cut and paste type music, but there's always wonderful original stuff coming out, you know, in every possible genre.
Sure. But it is being taught like that, not everywhere, but it is being taught like that. I mean, I've seen so many architecture students come out of college, and it's what they're being taught.
Yeah, that's what we want to talk about on the next show, isn't it?
You know,
we want to talk about the creative process and how you have ideas, how to have an idea, how to be original, how to be creative, and what process you have to go through to make that happen.
Yeah.
But you need the guys that can guide people through that process. You know, like Brian Eno is one of those guys. He's like, that's boring. We've heard this a million times. Grab that ukulele and, you know, and then do it again. Yeah, exactly. I mean,
and record that.
Did that suck? Okay, good. I have another idea, you know, and then force that iteration, because you're right. Like, I think about the modern baseball stadium, and they all look better, and they're functionally a lot better than the old days because we have better materials and stuff, but they're also designed to maximize revenue. And so you can buy a ticket in the bottom part of the bowl, right? Like the lower level, and be in row ZZ. And you're like, I'm nowhere near the ball game. I'm 50 rows away. You know, how is this better? Oh, so I can go behind me by 10 feet and buy a beer for $20. You know, that's not a better game experience. They've lost.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's interesting because it's six of one and half a dozen of the other, as we say. Because sometimes I love going to a stadium gig because I want to see a big show.
Sure.
You know, going and seeing Muse at Wembley Stadium is just wow, fantastic. You know, so it's sort of. Big doesn't always necessarily mean better, but sometimes it does.
Yeah. And Wembley's a slightly different thing, I think, in terms of music venues. But yeah, you can be at a general admission concert where you can fill up that bottom, and you want that grass field to be massive, so everybody can have a great time.
Yeah.
But you can, at least in America, you can literally be 500 feet away from the stage.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. So big.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really big. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I love Hall & Oates. You can go to Hollywood Bowl and be hundreds of feet from the stage and spend $180 for one ticket.
Ah,
Yeah, that's a lot of money. And
yeah.
it's
But how
hard
mu-
to push the art that far back.
but how much are the Stones tickets?
I got those through that veteran thing. I wouldn't have bought them otherwise. So
They're
they were
expensive, aren't they?
yeah.
So
I get it for a transaction fee. But you're right. Paul McCartney's not cheap to go see if you want to go see him, you know.
But speaking of scale, I've been mostly working in China for the past year, and I'm just about to go out there again. And they do things big over there.
Yeah.
You know, it makes everywhere else seem pretty small. You know, it's just everything is on such a huge scale. You know?
Yeah.
And I'm always struggling to get them to put can we lower the roof a bit? It's like, no, we need a 30 feet ceiling above us. It's like, it's okay to have low ceilings in some places, guys.
Yeah.
I was trying to get these two little cottages. They were like little fairy tale cottages. And they were freaking out, sending me all these emails saying that the ceilings are too low. The ceilings are too low. Oh, it's a disaster. I turned up there and I was like, guys, they're cottages, you know.
Yeah.
They're supposed to have low ceiling.
You're supposed to duck to go in.
Yeah. And I had to, I was telling them all these stories about how in the UK people actually live in houses where they duck to go in. They're like 600 years old and da da da. And eventually they sort of once again, you know, once I told them the story and the narrative, they got it and they engaged with it. But that's not how we do things, you know. We like things lots of space. You know?
Yeah, lots of space. Well, listen, for reals, let's shut this thing down. I love it. We could indeed do this another hour easily. But for right now, stand by and I'll be right back. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so much for watching the Break It Down Show.